the platform for what I do as an interventionist. My name is Claudia Bracho. I have done gang intervention and prevention work for 25 years in the city of Los Angeles, particularly and specifically to the west side of Los Angeles. I worked for Helper Foundation, Venice Barrios Unidos, which are agencies that worked on the west side, Venice and Mar Vista, Culver City, Delray area. I am now currently at Urban Peace Institute, and now I have the capacity to work with intervention agencies across Los Angeles, from the valleys to South LA. I know that you guys have been in discussions about the school to prison pipeline, and with the group that I work with, the specific population that I work with and have worked with for many years, I can say I'm going to just say 100% of them, in my experience, have dealt with a justice system in one way or another. And so we concentrate and we work specifically with that. And I just wanted to start with this, just starting with, I don't know, whenever we present to young people or anybody in a group, can't assume that we know what things mean. So I'd like to start off with just a definition of what the school to pipeline prison is. So that refers to practices and policies that disproportionately place students of color into a criminal justice system. And so, when we talk to young people about this and we explain to them, when they're getting in trouble in school, what does that mean? Why am I being suspended? Why are these things happening? And with the groups that we work with, is all Black and brown young people that we work with, and adults as well. We wanted to show something to them so they can plainly see how kind of the system works and break it down in a way that would capture their attention. And so we worked with Otis School of Art and Design, and in a course called Homeboy Histories, where interventionists were kind of the mentors for these young students to connect with community issues and create something for the community that would help provide a resource or information or education. And so what we came up with was this poster. So I don't know, this is kind of an old school game, Life. I don't know if any of you remember that, or raise your hands if you remember this board game. They put different things on the board game that had to do with life. You didn't know what was going to happen or what the outcome would be. So we wanted to put this, this is the life is in the school to pipeline, prison to pipeline path. So if you see these two young guys right here, leaving school, right at the very bottom of the screen, they're in their high school. So their trajectory and their vision is directly towards where that young woman is walking, college. That should be the viewpoint that, that's the possibility, that's the potential for young people that are going to school. That's what we would hope that they would be able to participate in, right? But along the way, that's not necessarily where life takes us, right? And so they're geared on this path and they land on different blocks that have different things set out for them, and different things that aren't going to lead them into that path of education necessarily at the time when they're ready to be there. And so I wanted just to show you closely. So here we have I think this is the very first landing block on this board game. So Black preschoolers are 3 times more likely to receive 1 or more out of school suspensions. So when we think of preschool, we think of a place where it's nurturing, where it's opening up your world, where you're learning your alphabet, where you're learning your colors, where you're socially interacting and learning how to be social. Why would there be punitive for anything that a young, preschoolers are babies, in my book. They're so little and so young, and to be punished in that way, to be not dealt with accordingly in terms of creating something where the behaviors could be adjusted or supported so that they don't, continue in that way. They're just such at a very developmental age, and a suspension and such punitive outcomes for something that a preschooler would do, it doesn't really clearly make any sense, right? So that's one of the first stops along this path. And then we look at the spinning wheel, right? So we look at this and we look at Black and Hispanic men make up 59% of the prison population. 59%, despite only accounting for 29% of the overall US population. So once again, 29% of the overall population, but 59% of them are incarcerated. So how does that match? How does that happen? And so we look at now, going back to the population that I work with, very specific, very very, it's not high risk. It's young people and adults that are affected by gang violence and participate in gang violence and criminal activities associated with gang membership. That is a group that I work with and have worked with. So we look at what happens to these young people, right? When does this turn in their life? So here, if we're looking at, you have already, young people that are on this track for basically for their color of their skin, that are being led into the pathway to prison. But now you double up with that, and you have young people that have been either profiled or are involved in gang activity that then become put on gang database. So when that happens, when you're on the gang database, you not only, if you commit a crime, if a young person commits a crime, like steal a soda or whatever it is, you get enhancements added to whatever that sentence would be. So there's the crime. So it's kind of like a crime on top of a crime, like a punishment on top of a punishment. You get more added time because they say that, well, you're doing it for the sake of the gang. So when that happens, how do you get on the gang database? So I've had young people, there's a list of criteria that has to be met. Only 2 of them. There's 10 different criteria. You're dressing a specific way that they believe to be gang attire, which many young people dress alike. A lot of it now, and I don't know if anybody's watched on social media, a lot of people are kind of emulating kind of an old culture that we would call like cholo culture, and they're dressing like that now. All races, it's not specific to Black and brown. But if you are identified by the police as wearing gang attire, if somebody says that you're involved in the gang, or if you're seen with gang members, that can be a criteria. If you are frequenting areas where gangs are habituating, that's considered that as well. So then you look at, if you live in a housing development and it's a lot of gang activity going on in that housing development, and you live there, and you're outside and you're around, people that you grew up with, that can be something that they will note, and that can be put into how you can be put into the gang database. I worked with a young man who was riding his bike from one part of the housing development to the other. The police stopped him, handcuffed him, and so they did like kind of routine spot because they thought something was suspicious. But then at that point, they took it a step further and placed him on the gang database because he had a red stripe on his tennis shoe. So, those are things that we can fight against and make sure that that doesn't happen to young people, because that's not enough to determine somebody's, if they're involved with gang activity. And a lot of times what this happens when young people keep getting pulled in and get pulled over by the police, psychologically that does something to them. And many times, and it's, studies have shown that they then will decide, well, I keep being treated like this, I might as well be that. So here you have all the different ways in which, young people are led into that way, into the prisons industrial complex. Black and Hispanic, they make up most of the prison system. And it begins in school, a place where we are thinking we're sending our children to learn, to be creative, to be thinkers. If you're going to look for a criminal in a school situation, you're going to find that. If you're looking for creative thinkers, you're going to find that. I worked at schools where they had a probation officer on campus and they had a police substation there. Why would a school have to have those type of things there? That isn't what we're sending our children there to do. We're sending our kids and young people to learn, to grow, to develop, to be responsible, to be part of our society, and putting, already instilling kind of like that institutionalization of law and on a campus is not conducive to learning situation. So what do we do? So we can say this is what's happening. We can say, let's have diversion programs. But what do we do in the in-between time? How do we go about addressing those issues and providing resources for those people in those communities? So In 2019, Los Angeles experienced a decline in gang-related homicides. So gang-related homicides dropped drastically in 2019. And then police have credited community outreach and gang intervention. So we can't always keep arresting ourselves out of crime. We need to figure out ways to provide resources, to provide mentorship, to provide leadership, to provide resources for families and communities that are ridden with gang activity and drugs as well. So if the thing with intervention is that we can't quantify the things that we stop when we stop them. Our mission is to stop retaliatory shootings between gang members. If something happens, we go in to decrease that from reoccurring again, but there's no way to be able to say, take no and take data, oh, we stop that person from shooting that person. There's a process that it takes to make that happen. And how do we develop that as interventionists? The biggest thing for an interventionist to know how to do is intentional outreach. When interventionists hit the ground, that we call community intervention workers, they are indigenous to their communities. They have also the credible messengers, and they have come from that lifestyle. So they're practitioners in a field where they know the mindset, they know they're trying to now, what they took from their community, they're trying to give back. So they have a deep understanding of the culture and how it works and how to best communicate with those young people. People that have, been let down by authority, have been let down by the schools, have been let down by systems, are not trusting. You have to be able to develop a trust with that population. And so people that are from that community, people that understand the inner workings of that community and understand that population are the best to be able to help and work with them and provide something for them to lead them out of that lifestyle. So what we have in intervention is we call an LTO. An LTO is a license to operate in a community. And how that happens is that you develop that by the community allowing you to work in their community. Gang members don't just say, here, you can come work with me because I trust you and you can do whatever you want to do and I'll go to your program. It doesn't work that way. It's relationships. It's building trust. It's building communication by being persistent, by being present in the community, by providing resources, by offering something to them and not making broken promises. And an LTO can be taken away if an outreach worker is, living both lives kind of way and isn't, on that path to really, saying what he's doing is what he's doing. It can be taken away. It's like a driver's license. It can be revoked. It is something that you build up to. I've worked in different communities where I wasn't necessarily from that community, and I had to go in there humbly, and I had to meet the right people and say, this is what I'm here to do. And then I had to show that. I had to be a resource. I had to provide programs. I had to help people, but I did that, and it took a while. It doesn't just happen automatically. You do build up to that. You show your consistency, you show your persistence, you show your reliability, and you're there for families. We don't just work with the individual that's involved in gangs. We work with their family, because if you just work with an individual and you send them back to a place where that might be where their stresses and their traumas lie, they'll just come back out and commit the same things and be involved in the same things. And so we provide one-on-one counseling to their individual, to the family, case management. We have life skill leadership programs that provide drug awareness, anger management, trauma-informed care, vicarious trauma. You have moms dealing with what their children are doing, and that tends to go over to them, and then they have these stresses. And financial income at home isn't necessarily what can help them raise their family. Young adults go out and make money the way that they think that they know how is best. So we try to provide trainings for jobs. We work with young people to develop that. A lot of these people, young people, don't finish school. Even when they come back from being in, they start in juvenile hall and end up in prison, and they come back out. Like we said, in that prison time, we're not able as humans to develop emotionally, materially. You stunt your growth and your development. as we heard previously. I've worked with many individuals coming out of being incarcerated, and unless they do some programming in there, it's a very hard transition. Emotionally, the level of maturity isn't there yet. And so if we don't grab them in that transition and provide a place for them where they feel like they can open up, to talk about their traumas, get resources and help for their traumas, be referred to places where we know they will be effective for them. That's the other thing. We know we're not therapists. We have to refer out, but we have to build that relationship with a therapist that we know that can deal with this population. It's not, it's a subculture that needs a lot of understanding and deep trust. It just doesn't come easy. They're not going to open up at the beginning. They're not going to open up in the middle. That takes a gathering of time. And so we work with people and their families for a while to get to that place. So what an LTO does, the license to operate, it allows for easy navigation through a neighborhood's hangouts where young people and adults might hang out. So the first step that an outreach worker does is identify these areas and, make their presence known, provide a credible message, letting them know about the programs they provide, letting them know the resources they have, whether it be a food pantry, clothes, help with their IDs, getting their social security, helping them, preparing them for a job. Because what we don't do is send people out when they're not ready to work yet. We do, go through a whole process of how do you interview? How do you get to work on them? How do you set your alarm to make sure you get there? What time do you go to bed? Because when you've been running a schedule that's connected to the streets, the schedule is different. You're maybe more on the nighttime than you are in the daytime. So all these things have to change and adjust. The way, talking to somebody, looking somebody in the eyes, all the things that we think that somebody did teach us that along the way. Well, this population wasn't taught that. They didn't learn that. And so now we're there to be able to provide that resource and make sure that they have that. And the thing that's been missing for them has been that they haven't done well in school for whatever reason. They've been suspended, they've been kicked out. So we have to be the net to catch them and to help them along the way. And so once your license to operate, the outreach worker is able to identify the highest risk youth, active and affiliated gang members. If you do not know the community, and if you do not know the ins and outs and the culture of what it is to be a gang member, it's a lot harder. I myself was not involved with gangs. I've worked in this work for 25 years, but I was always worked with and mentored by people that were. I grew up in neighborhoods that were very heavily influenced by gangs and a lot of gang activity. I ended up working because I lived in two areas that were rivals to one another. And since I knew communities because I lived in them, I was able to navigate both. And also being a woman, I also wasn't perceived as threatening when I came into a different neighborhood. That was an advantage. Women are very integral and critical to this work because they provide a balance. They provide that nurture and that care. Young men that are involved in gangs have a lot of bravado, have a lot of ego, and are not going to open up about their stresses in life to another man. They will tell them the street related things, and then they will tell their, the case manager or a woman, they will tell them more of the stresses that are going on. And then the case manager, who's oftentimes is a woman and outreach worker, will then work together, knowing that these are the stresses that are happening at home, and this is why you're seeing this happen out in the streets. So it's like a partnership. It's very important. It wasn't always this way. Women were not, because gangs were predominantly male, so they were not part of intervention. That's been, for me, I think it's happened slowly, but now there is a lot of women in this work, and we've seen a critical impact that they've made, and we've said big changes that have happened as well. So an intervention, it never, violence doesn't stay stagnant. It's fluid. It changes all the time. And so as interventionists, we have to meet together often, figure out strategies amongst each other. We not, let me just kind of back up and say that in intervention, there's people that come from the lifestyle, but they didn't just pop into this work and say, okay, I used to do that, now I'm doing this. We have training academies where we train workers in conflict mediation, in vicarious trauma and trauma-informed care. And we have people that are specialists in this field. And these are some of them. Melvin Hayward these are all people from Los Angeles, but who have been sought out to work in other places. And we know in Chicago, there's a tremendous amount of gun violence and gang violence. And now he is the director of programs there. Paul Carrillo is also from Los Angeles, was part of the Lifestyles, and now he's the director at Giffords Law Center, who works to reduce gun violence and change gun laws. Ben Taco Owens, he's the executive director of Detours Mentoring Group in Gardena. Priscilla Lozano is a program coordinator of Soledad Enrichment in East LA, and Tina Padilla is the director. She's one of the only women directors of intervention in Los Angeles. It just happened last year, and it's a big move for us as women in this work. Gerald Cavett, he's the veteran of this work. He's been working in South LA and has done phenomenal things to reduce gang violence in his community. All of these people I consider my mentors and my colleagues. And when I was working on thinking after the pandemic, well, it's not after because we're still in the pandemic, but during the pandemic, violence rose and gang activity also rose. We sat down and we created a survey to go out and work and present it to intervention workers that are on the ground doing the work to see where they thought violence was going, where they thought gang activities going in their respective communities. These are some of the people who I just mentioned. There's Taco, Ben, there's Paul and Melvin Hayward. And that's at the Giffords conference when we discussed saving lives and reducing gun violence. So we came up with a survey. It was so that we can go back into training so we would know what our workers needed right now, because we hadn't had a training because of the pandemic. We weren't able to meet, we did some things by Zoom, but we knew the trainings that we do at the Los Angeles Violence Intervention Training Academy needed to be in person. It's just the way that it's built. It's 144 hours of training. We knew there was some changes we had to make because violence was changing. So we came up with a survey, and it seems like very simple questions, but we tried to make it that way, but it took a lot of hours to just come up with these questions just to see what was happening in these communities. So the first question was, what is the biggest contributor to violence in your community? In your opinion, has there been an increase in violence, and why? Have you seen music impact the violence in your community? If so, how? And how much does social media impact the work you're doing in your community, positively or negatively, and how? What is the one thing you would like to have addressed in La Vida that can help you be more effective in your work? So we wanted to have workers' input into what they thought needed to be taught in this training academy so that they can be effective in their work when they go out there and work with the community. It was surprisingly, even for me, I know social media, we all know in gang work that it drives most of it. You have people creating what we call beefs between each other, and they don't even live in Los Angeles, they live elsewhere. You have people showing up at candlelight vigils and filming it live, like in other neighborhoods, and knocking down the candles to be disrespectful to another gang, and they post it. So now they're seeing each other. And so these things are like where we think people used to, quote unquote, like see each other and fight. It doesn't happen that way anymore. Things are created through social media. Arguments are created on there, and they're very also fine-tuned. In Chicago, they're known for creating emojis that reflect different gangs. They twist the emojis around and they give messages back and forth to each other in that way. Social media has driven a lot of what society is going on in terms of interaction, but in terms of gang involved situations, it does drive a lot of it. Things that might have not been an issue can become an issue. People that are not even involved in that way create issues, and it's spread rapidly, as we all know how social media works in that way. So when we went out and, it's across LA, so we have the Valley, And then we have Northeast. We went to South Central LA. We went to what they call the Newton area. We went to West LA. We went all over Los Angeles and talked to intervention workers, had a discussion about what was happening. And interestingly enough, social media was a driving force, and music as well. There's underground rappers now who will talk about something that they did or create an interaction in a fight with another gang through rapping, and they post it. Once again, YouTube it, all that, so it spreads out again. But one thing that I thought was very interesting is that during the pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs, right? People were isolated. So of course, being isolated created a whole bunch of anxiety, anger built up. It didn't stop violence during that time when we were out there working. It was still happening. Intervention didn't stop. We were out there being essential workers, distributing food to our communities, distributing PPE, making sure that our communities were at least taken care of in the way that we could and that we knew how, and being in the middle of stopping gang violence from occurring. One thing that we found was that once, there wasn't money, and then a lot of people applied for these PPP loans and got all this money. So all this money was getting then kind of poured in, they didn't do it the right way. People didn't sign up for those loans and do the right thing often. And there was money in the communities, guns were bought, drugs were bought, and then that money dried up. So then what happens after that? So then it keeps on like circulating, and then you find other ways, and a lot of robberies happen. We've seen a surge in criminal activity since the pandemic. We've seen things rise. We've seen gang activity rise as well. And so our work is cut out for us. We know we have a lot of work to do, but we know, as what we do know, and from experience and from working with people can change, right? If they've provided that pathway and provided those resources, what people do shouldn't define them of who they are, who they can become. Everybody has the potential. Our communities are just, they're hungry and they don't have a lot. And they were hit hard by COVID. That was another thing. A lot of deaths happened because of that. So you had young people who lost their parents, who lost their grandparents due to that, and now they're scrambling. And so intervention and prevention are the things that we want to have in place, so that they don't have to have. That could be the diversion. That could be the place. That could be the place where we help them develop as young people in society. So this is, when we went, we discussed what the trends were, how they were experiencing the uptick. You have people that are daily working in their communities, understanding, they have their hands on the pulse of what's happening in the streets. They know the ins and outs. They know when things are coming by watching. Intervention is all kind of a big network, and we all tie into each other. So when things happen in one part of LA, we know, and if it's going to affect us, we talk amongst each other just to make sure that those things are in place, so that violence doesn't happen and that there's no retribution or retaliatory shootings from that as well. So we meet every Wednesday, the Los Angeles Violence Intervention Coalition. It's comprised of 16 frontline violence intervention organizations and advocacy groups throughout Los Angeles. And we're focused on ending gun homicide epidemics in Los Angeles. Urban Peace is who I work for. I'm a community safety fellow, and we meet and we talk about how to support intervention, and we talk about strategies and how we can be more effective in the work. We have to be on the cutting edge of working with people that are involved in this activity. So we have to always be, meeting, creating surveys, creating curriculums. Our training academy has people come, academics come, therapists come, counselors comes, but the meat of our academy is practitioners who do the work, who are part of the work, who understand the culture, who have been in that life. They are subject matter experts. They are the ones who are able to be the credible messengers. They are like the authorities in this work. They are most keen to how to address these issues, how to approach it. We continue to grow and develop. We don't just say we were that lifestyle, we don't need training. We're always training, we're always learning, we're always trying to enhance the field and make it stronger and more effective. These are some of the LAVIC members on a retreat where we went it wasn't much of a retreat. What we did is we worked a lot on figuring out how to organize our communities, how to now, since we're dealing with this pandemic and this surge in violence, how do we approach that? How do we break up and go back into our communities and be able to provide services and deal with the violence that's happening now? How do we get our young people to be able to have a change in their mind, have a different pathway led for them? We worked tirelessly this whole weekend. That whole weekend, we didn't have much of a, recourse to have fun or anything like that. We knew we were in the middle of, not only being kind of virus interrupters, but we're violence interrupters. We knew our communities were dealing with COVID, and how did we get young people and people in our communities, Black and Brown, that were very resistant to the vaccine? How do we approach that? So there was all these things that we needed to do. But one of the things that also came is that intervention, although we were deemed essential workers and we were out there working, we have contracts with the city. We don't have the support financially. We're not, a lot of people, these young men and women and older adults, they work 24/7, because if there's a shooting in the community, they have to, 3 o'clock in the morning, they're called out there to make sure that they're there to provide a sense of crowd control, to make sure rumors don't get out. Interventionists very, very, very keen on working on rumor control. Rumors can create a dynamic of violence that is unseen. Somebody gets shot, they'll say, oh, this gang shot it. And it might not even be the case. It could be a domestic violence situation that happens. So interventionists are very good at finding out the facts, finding out how to stop rumors from spreading. Mostly that they stop rumors from spreading and make sure that people aren't saying, oh, no, this person did it, that person did it, finding out what, how to stop that from spreading. And so that happens usually when someone's shot right there at the scene. They have just to go there to make sure that, emotions are with the family, that they can kind of make sure that nothing spins out during that time. And understanding their communities and being from the communities is a lot of what helps them and guides this work. They are the credible messengers. But the thing is that they don't have, you're working 24/7. A lot of them even have to take on second jobs, because interventionists, they don't have 401ks, they don't have retirement plans, they don't have hazard pay. I think now intervention workers making $45,000 a year. I mean, it's not enough to survive if you have a family and living in Los Angeles. We all know how the rent is. And so we also come together to figure out ways to how we can fund all the peacemakers, not just one agency, but all the peacemakers across Los Angeles. And we work nationally with that as well. I don't think I wanted to end it yet, but sorry. Our prevention part of this is that the prevention group that we work with are ages 10 to 15. Now, our prevention works a little bit differently. We know there's a lot of youth that are high risk. Their activity that they deal with, they might be cutting school, they might be smoking, weed, or there's things that they do that are very high risk. But the people that we seek out have to have characteristics that would lead them into becoming a gang member. They might not be, but they have these characteristics that can go that way. They have multi-generational family members. They live in a community where that's prevalent. They participate in things that are more prone to gang activity. They're starting to hang out in groups. But it's very, very precise on who we work with. There's a lot of, boys and girls clubs. There's a lot of programs for youth that need prevention, but ours are specifically to anybody that could be involved with gangs. And then we work with what we call intervention, is the people that are involved with gang, people that are coming out of prison that are, still carrying that mentality and bringing it back, because a lot of times things take off when people come out of prison, because they left it a certain way and they come back with the same mentality. And so we want to be the people that are there to provide their resources. And we have pro-social activities. A lot of these young people have not ever been on field trips. They dropped out of school. So we took some young people to the museum, and they felt very uncomfortable being there, like that wasn't the place for them. And then once they got there, they want to go see the dinosaur museum, the zoo, bowling. Often we take them bowling and it's the first time they've ever been bowling. When you are in a gang, your mentality is this area only, and you don't step out of that, right? It's kind of this illegal job that creates undue stress and undue responsibility for young people and adults. It's something that nobody likes to have on their shoulders. There's several conditions that kind of push you to that way, make you participate in that. And so we're there to kind of peel off those layers and get to the root of where their trauma lies and how to help them with that. And that's really the big part of this. A lot of our people have been affected by trauma, have seen violence in their lives, have participated in violence. And so we want to be the ones to reduce violence. We're not anti-gang. We don't follow that. We want to reduce violence in our communities. We want our communities to be safe, to be whole, and to be able to grow and flourish. And we have our leadership group sessions where we have young people lead it, where we have them come in and talk about different subjects, traumas that they've been a part of. During the pandemic, we had Zooms, some of our young people we lost to gun violence. And so we wanted to make sure that we talked about that and had a healing part to that. And to, when you hear young people talk about, that it's kind of, when they hear something, a noise, they're always hyper vigilant. That's not a normal way to have to live, but that's the way that they've developed their survival skills. And so we want to help create a space and place for them where they can feel safe. And we want to be able to provide these resources and give them alternatives. And having interventionists work closely with them, with the case manager, with all the other things. We have people from schools come in. We worked closely with this program with Otis College of Art and Design, and they came in and they did art workshops, all those things. We have amazing, talented individuals in vulnerable communities. They're artists, they're musicians, they're singers, they're teachers, they're philosophers. We just have to pull out that potential and show them and provide resources for them and their families so that they can be successful in individual success. And that's how we measure it. I think that we have now time for a question and answer.
Hi, Claudia. Someone asked, can you give us a case study, an example of how you do what you do? And we got about 2 minutes or a minute now.
How do I get somebody in and how we start working with them? Is that
just an example of how you do what you do.
Okay, so we have somebody that we know is involved in gangs. I'm not gonna actually get, I had a young man who did in housing development. His father was a Crip. He was not involved in gang activity. He was 13, but he was in a development where they didn't like Crips there. His father left. He left the son there by himself. And so the way the young man learned to survive was to join that gang. So knowing who he was and knowing the community, reached out to him, just said hey, look, we have this program here. We provide resources. We can help you with,
Thank you for your patience, Claudia, for being cut off. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity for you to finish that response. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us back to the main room. It is now time for, I don't know if all the presenters had an opportunity to have a question and answer session in their breakout rooms. But for the ones who didn't, this is now the time where we have our 20-minute, 15-minute break. And at that time, if the presenters are able to stick around and answer questions, that's fine. If not, we have our break until 1:35. So that's about 20 minutes. So if everyone that's not interested in the question and answer panel can make sure to come back at 1:35, we can continue the show. But from now until 1:35, we're either on break or we're at the question and answer panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I had a question for Martin. We were just in his room.
Yes.
This is Paradis.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how you pronounce my name.
Yeah, sorry, Paradis.
No worries. I wanted to ask, so how does Mediators Beyond Borders go to the different countries to mediate? Like what's the logistics behind it? Are they like, oh, there's a conflict here, and then they all get on planes and go, or virtually?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of the initial visions for Mediators Beyond Borders was asking the question of, instead of, parachuting troops into a region, what if we parachuted mediators or peace builders into regions and sowed peace instead, which is on its surface a really beautiful vision, except the last thing we want to do is parachute people from the outside with the idea that we're going to solve problems within the local context. And so what we do is, first, we're only invited into these regions, and then we work with local partners and help build their skills and capacities for them to engage. And really, they're in charge of the entire process and making sure everything is both trauma-informed and culturally informed and relevant. As an outsider, one of the things I bring is the ability to ask questions, because often when it's our own culture, our own conflict, we can't see a bunch of it. So we do have a role to play as an outsider to be able to ask these questions, but ultimately putting people in the heart of conflict, that are in the heart of conflict in the role is our goal, and the only thing that motivates us to do so. A tip I can share with everyone is some important piece that my mentor shared with me, and in this work, because there's no end to the number of people in need, the amount of conflicts around the world, is to ask the first question: do you have permission to help this person or these people? That's the first question. And the second question is, do you have permission not to help these people? And if you can't answer yes to both questions, there's a good chance that your ego might be involved, and you're probably best off not being engaged. Thank you for the question.
May I ask a question for Claudia? I'm a Superior Court judge in Santa Clara County. We have, I think, 8 young people in our secure track program, all very gang engaged. Are you aware of any gang programs specifically designed for young people who are incarcerated?
I mean, it's just hard to get into the facilities. We did have, and we do have, a Mayor I Can program, and I do have a Phil Morris, who goes into the juvenile system, and they go through this program, a Mayor I Can. It's like a self-development, self-awareness curriculum, and it kind of helps them with that. So when they transition, when they can get out, then they can be put into a agency that can deal with that. But it's been difficult to get into the in there and do the work, but we do have some people that are able to do that and are trying to create programs there. We need a lot more, obviously.
Okay, I'll contact you offline. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question for Martin. Martin, you on one of your slides, you said that during crisis, that is the hardest time to approach people. What is the clue, the advantage, or what would you do to break through the crisis to start the talking? How do you get there?
So the slide you're referencing says that a crisis is you can't invent resiliency in a crisis. And so often we intend to be reactive to crisis, and it's not an ideal time because of where our brains are in those moments. And so what we're trying to do as a practitioner working, but the reality is that's when we're called in. And so if we had more time, what we would talk about is how to get people back into a space of listening and curiosity. And so taking, how do we create that safety? How do we start to begin to see ourselves in the others? But that starts first with being present to what is and acknowledging what wrongs have occurred, and being present first to what has been before anyone's ready for transformation. Is being acknowledging the pain that someone's experiencing, and not trying to work them or their community through it any faster than they're ready to do so.
Thank you.
I have a question for Claudia. You talked to, I mean, the interventionists are doing such amazing work, and you briefly spoke about funding, and I'm just curious as to, for residents of Los Angeles, what can we do to help organizations like yours, to put pressure on our politicians, our council members to give more funding? I thought it was interesting that you talked about how the numbers had dropped pretty drastically in 2019, and then we've seen that spike during COVID, which suggests clearly something was being done right before, and that there's certainly economic factors there. And so what can we do as everyday citizens to help put pressure to provide more funding for what we know works?
Follow our Urban Peace on our Instagram, Urban Peace Institute, and we put up different times when they're coming into city councils coming to me, and when those monies are about to be distributed, and when we want people to call in on those 3-minute calls to like provide resources and funding for peacemakers. That we need that a lot. We need that support. We need, when we even have to go up to Sacramento to speak, but they post all those things when they're happening, and how people can get involved. I'll put it in the Urban Peace Institute here in the chat.
Thank you for that, Claudia. There's a question also in the chat for you that it's kind of relevant to where you got cut off earlier. And it's asking if you could walk us through a day when you and your coworkers are dealing with an active gang conflict, or what your day looks like, how your work unfolds.
We get asked this a lot. Our day is never the same. That's one thing. Our day, because things happen, right? We have like this is what we have when we get there. We do a graffiti check, because that's the way to see what's happening in the community, in the streets. And then we have where, you make your appointments to have your one-on-ones come in. But when violence occurs, and if it's an active gang conflict that's happening, there's key individuals who are very precise mediators in that. Not everybody can do this. They will reach out to another interventionist in that community. Like, let's say there's, gang A and gang B something happened, somebody shot gang B. So when they reach out, they'll okay, let's find out. So then once those interventionists talk to each other, then they go out into the community and start to talk to people to see, what happened. What's like, what are the facts, right? It doesn't just happen over, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes some time. Sometimes it's like you have to put the piece together. You have to make sure that rumors are not part of it. You have to kind of de-escalate and get rid of rumors. And so once they've talked, on each respective community, they've talked to the people that might be involved in it. Then comes the part where, okay, what are we going to do now? Are we going to then come to a mediation? And then doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be, we're going to stop. It means maybe we come together and say there's going to be a non-aggression agreement. That means, you know, we're not going to aggress on you. If we don't see you, we stay away from you. We're not going to aggress on you, and we leave it at that. When it keeps on happening, a lot of times and you get more people involved, and more people, innocent people start getting hurt. Then it becomes, okay, now we need to like really come in there, really do something about just, you know, completely stopping this from happening. And so then we have to really, it's always getting the key players to the table, and that's the difficult part, right? And interventionists know who they are, know who to talk to, and then just bringing them to the table and saying, like, what are we going to do now? Because nobody likes violence. That's not anything that's like, you know, inherent to, like, as humans. We don't like violence. We don't want to see that happen. It comes out of a mentality of protecting whatever they believe needs to be protected. And so, you know, then you can come to a place, okay, well, we're going to just, you know, have a peace treaty. It works different with Black gangs and brown gangs. It's completely different. It doesn't work the same way. Culture, race, it has a lot to do with it. And so for the communities I worked with, there was a race war at one time, and that is the biggest and the most disastrous thing that can happen. We were always prone to like get into the make sure that that doesn't happen. Things happen, and the streets are, you know, directed by prison, things that happen in prison. And so that's what I'm saying. A day is never typical for us in terms of, there are certain things that we do, but when things, it's like, then we have this other piece of the job that we do, right? When we're helping families and we're helping those individuals and we're providing resources for them, and then violence happens, then we have to address it, and we have to, you know, work towards being very strategic and dealing with that, and calling the right people to the table. That, you know, if you don't get the right person, nothing can change. There's people that have that influence and pull in their communities. And so that's why interventionists are very key, because they know the communities and they know the people.
Thank you so much.
I had a question in regards to sort of like the youth justice aspect of it. So I know a lot of times, sometimes we get students and our peers coming in, and we often suspect gang violence as or membership in a gang as a problem, but oftentimes it can be a sensitive topic for some students and jurors to bring up. How is the right way we could approach it in a trial, in a peer restorative justice sort of setting, to ask individuals and figure out if they are involved in gangs and what proper steps we should take to sort of fix those issues?
Well, you know, that's the thing. A gang member is not going to, if you go up to a gang member and say, are you in a gang? They're not going to tell you yes. It's not, that's like kind of a code of thing that you don't do. That's why I think intervention is so key, because interventionists do know who is involved. They do know who's participating in that activity. They're not just gonna, that's, I mean, you know, you get pulled over by police, you're not going to say, yeah, I'm in a gang. So to anybody that they don't know, they're not going to say that. You're kind of incriminating yourself about stuff that you do. So that's not, if you ask them, you know, it's more like it's a kind of removing that label, and you're just treating somebody like a student, like everybody that I worked with. I'm using the word gang here very specifically because I want you to understand who I work with and what activities they participate. But when I work with people and families, they're students that walk through the door with the same potential, the same aspirations as anybody else. I raised my daughters in these communities and put my daughters through school. I didn't see any difference with them and them, just the resources that I was able to provide in terms of school and that. But they're just, you know, a gang member is a human, is what it is.
No, I understand. Thank you for clarifying it. I was just in terms of, because I know the particular teen court setting in which, because I'm a student, and the particular teen court setting that we have at our school and across the LA County Court District or Juvenile Court District is we offer some things like gang preventions and trainings through associated nonprofits, but oftentimes as students who are asking questions without adults who have more information on that than we do, just simply asking, how should we sort of figure out what treatment in that moment or what restorative justice approaches could be beneficial to them?
I mean, my suggestion is to talk to intervention. They, it's not really like across the line, because there's also, gangs are very geographical, right? And very culturally ran. And so it all depends. There's so many factors with that. I think that you would just provide, like, you just talk to them like, well, we have these programs that might benefit you, that might help you. If you have a court, I'll say this, I got a lot of, our program is voluntarily. They don't receive a stipend to be in or anything like that, but a lot of them are on probation. A lot of them have to go back to court. Well, I'm like, you want to, take a letter to court, it's going to help you out. And I can go to court with you and you'll see how that changes. And that happens. I've gotten a lot of kids out of, punitive, like, punishments for going to court with them, saying that they're involved in the program. And young people, they know this, they understand that. They know that being in programs helps them. And once they start to enjoy, I mean, really, you got to make your programs enjoyable, right? You have to have pizza, you have to have things that, young people like, but you have to have something that's relatable as well. And so once you just get them that pull, it's always just keep on trying. It's like being relentless, kind of. You're there for them and supporting them, and you let them know that. You're just giving them humanity. I hope I answered your question.
No, thank you.
How dangerous is the work you do, Claudia, for you and your other interventionists?
Well, for myself, I've been around violence, I've seen violence, but for some reason I've been protected in some ways, because I have, you're talking about, men and women who, if you know the community, you understand the community, and you know how it runs and works, you know something before it's going to come, so you know how to move out of the way. I was in a situation during the pandemic when a young man walked into the park after he distributed food and shot somebody. That was the first time in my 25 years that, but let me tell you this, because I work with such kind of intervention workers, are just like so fine-tuned. 2 months before that happened, there was things happening in the community. There was like some beef going on. There was cars driving through the neighborhood. So they're very aware, like, okay, this car is out of place here. And so we were kind of not preparing for something to happen, but being prepared. So, our interventionist said, like, if somebody comes through and they start to shoot, like, you've got to duck and roll, like, taught us that. Like, really, we went down the ground, we laid, we rolled, did all that. And so when that shooting actually happened, and I'm going to say this, the guy got hit in the shoulder, he's okay, he's fine, nothing really bad happened. I went under a table, a concrete table, and I didn't even see the shooting. I just heard it, but I went under the table, and I wasn't panicked. I mean, of course, after that we had to, we do yoga. We have a guy that did yoga in prison, and we do yoga. Like, there was trauma. So, but in that initial moment, because it's a preparation and awareness. So when you have preparation and awareness, danger is eliminated in some ways. Like, I'm also not going to go travel places alone. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go into if there's a group of people and it's nighttime, I'm not going to walk up there by myself. We're always in a team. We always work together. We're not like alone in this. And so we create safety and security for ourselves as well. But things do happen. One of my colleagues got shot in the foot. He's been a Black man in LA, and he got shot in the foot last month. But out there doing the work, I'm dealing with people and families. I mean, we have school shootings happen that aren't gang members. And so it's not, I don't feel afraid. I don't feel scared. I feel that this work is very important and it needs to be done. And I haven't been hurt in all these 25 years. I haven't been hurt.
Thank you, Claudia. And I just want to bring to your attention that in the chat, there's a lot of gratitude for your work, a lot of expressed gratitude, and for the clarity that you brought, and for your work in general, and for your team. It looks like we're announcing that was the last response for now, so that we can give both of our speakers a moment and also move forward in our schedule for today. But we again can give some applause, and thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate this panel. Really appreciate you taking the time to answer everyone's questions and concerns. But now I will pass over the mic to our co-hosts so they can introduce our next guest.
Now there's going to be another opportunity for you to choose between two breakout rooms. In one, Gina and Tina Coyle from our Facilitative Solutions team will be hosting a workshop on Ubuntu, an African leadership model. And in the other, David Irvin and Thomas Salmon will be hosting a talk on how dialogue can be used to redesign youth justice. And those breakout rooms will open in just a second.
Thank you so much, Angelina.
Breakout rooms are now open. As a reminder, you will need to scroll down to the bottom to see them. Please join the room that meets your interests. Thank you so much.